Come on, you undead son of a bitch! Die! Haha! So that's Torment, World Tier 4 Capstone Dungeon beaten and unlocked at level 59. Not too bad. Hello then, my fellow sorcerers. How fare you this fine day in hell? I will never get tired of being able to say that and it being genuinely true at the start of a video. Of course, as of today, the game is fully out, and it's awesome to see another flood of fresh meat enter Sanctuary, and they will in time get to the Capstone Dungeon for Tier 4. But I imagine a lot of you guys that have already been playing are kind of at their point where you want to start thinking about it. The earlier you can get into Torment, the better. The better drops, the better XP, it just makes everything speed up exponentially. But of course that means beating a level 70 dungeon that is extra hard, extra long, and has one ridiculous final boss that needs you to really be on it, both playstyle and build-wise. Well, I'm here to at least help you with build-wise by updating and upgrading our R-Class Sorcerer for you in a manner that will let you beat the Capstone Dungeon for Torment as early as, well, I guess like level 58-ish could probably do this, maybe even earlier. Honestly, I would have liked to have given it a go, but I certainly did it at level 59, and it felt very comfortable. Essentially, we've managed to both upgrade it offensively and defensively at the cost of some trash wave clear, which, to be fair, we didn't actually need to have that much of to begin with, at least not when pushing difficult content like this that is all about killing elites, bosses, and then not dying. So with that in mind then, of course, we'll go over the legendaries effects you need, the uniques you need, the Paragon board setup you need, and the glyphs, and most importantly, the actual skill tree, abilities, and playstyle that we're now going to be adopting. I will be showing the whole skill tree, of course, but for those of you that want a more general overview theory of why this build is the way that it is and why that it works, I will link you the original full in-depth breakdown of the synergies and how this all plays down below, along with an updated version based on the patch that you can get up to speed with. For now then, here we go. So here we are then with the build. I will go over the specific changes and why from the last version that I talked about, and then let you just slowly see the entire thing so you can copy along with your own points. What's actually different then? Well, we have no longer got points in Lightning Spear, as the extra damage it added, while nice, isn't really needed when killing things quickly isn't so much a problem, it's not dying to them, and your ultimate is still so powerful even without that happening. We also then have lost Fireball. Yes, indeed, that means the enchantment is no longer used, and we have a new synergy in mind. We also now gain Icy Veils, so our barriers last for 15% longer. This is critical for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's more survivability, but we have a lot of power boosts that happen while we have a barrier up, and this, of course, extends that time. It really is a lovely bit of win-win here. Then we have gained ourselves Supreme Unstable Current, so we just pulse out crackling energy while we're in it. It's a nice little increase to our damage, and I found it worth the point in my testing since last time. Then we have probably the most notable change that you have probably seen, which is of course one rank in Firebolt. We're not going to start casting it, it's here for the enchantment, so that whenever we attack anything with any ability, it gets set on fire, meaning permanent 100% Devouring Blaze uptime, which is obviously delicious. It also plays hugely into the first Paragon board we will choose that gives us the single greatest general strength boost that we can get our hands on at this stage of the game, and it really is a massive one, and it requires this enchantment. It will skyrocket our ability to melt elites and bosses, while also skyrocketing our ability to tank them. We also then have a single rank of Glass Cannon with a last spare point, and that tells you how tanky this build is, that we can afford to take a cheeky rank of Glass Cannon. So I will let the build just play, and then we'll go over how it's actually affected the playstyle and the major legendary that makes this actually kind of ridiculous. So the single target has gone up thanks to, of course, our enchantment, which is now Firebolt. The damage here is kind of, it's negligible, but the main source is that when we do Arc Lash, and indeed the damage from Flame Shield, the damage from your teleport, and so on, we will now set enemies on fire, which means anyone you are attacking with this is just permanently on fire, which obviously means we permanently have our lovely extra crit damage passive active, which is a huge notable damage increase to the build, especially against elites and bosses, and at the moment we've reached the point where we don't need the Firebolt Enchantment's help to clear packs of enemies, because Frost Novering and just blasting them down vulnerable, stunned and frozen is absolutely more than enough to cleave through trash. So if we actually go find an enemy, so I can give you a little demonstration. So I have found a volunteer group of skeletons here to show you what I mean. Now when we Arc Lash enemies, they get set on fire for 8 seconds. And now they're taking bonus damage from our crits the entire way through, which as you can imagine is obviously really, really lovely and helps you burn through your random trash and obviously burn through big chunky health bars. That is very nice. But it is the defensive improvements that I am most excited for when it comes to this build. So, when we press one of our abilities, let's say teleport, multiple things happen. Boom, we get a barrier on ourselves, which now lasts longer, of course, because we have Icy Veil, and we get the barrier in the first place because of protection. That is great, but also it is a cooldown, so we get this blast of lightning around us. We get that because we still use the Arc Lash enchantment to stun all the enemies around us. Obviously, stunned enemies in this build are dead enemies, thanks to primarily this 35% increased damage to stunned enemies, but there's other synergies feeding into that too. Our damage is at its peak when we're hitting a stunned enemy, so every time we're pressing a button, stunning everyone around us, that makes a lot of sense, and you know that's what's going on here. So, we also then, when we do stun people, of course, blast them with damage with Shocking Impact. So essentially, when we press a button, we stun everyone, start hitting them really hard, do a bonus burst of damage, and get a barrier that makes us much harder to kill. That is glorious. But notice, of course, that Unstable Currents is also a cooldown. It's our big DPS cooldown, saved for staggered bosses, or packs of elites, or a particularly troublesome elite, or a huge screen of enemies you want to burn through, but it is a cooldown, so when we press it, boom, we get the barrier, we pulse the Arc Lash enchantment, that's all good. So you might think, okay, where are you going with this? Well, let me start just randomly attacking now that it's run out. You will notice that eventually I will cast a random shock spell, like that, there we go, I got the barrier, I got the pulse of lightning, as if Unstable Currents was on. And you might know the legendary effect that's doing this, but did you know it worked like this? So if we look at this then, while Unstable Currents is not active, your shock skills have a 7% chance to trigger a free cast from it. You would be forgiven for reading that and think, okay, so that just means that, yeah, my skills have a 7% chance to do an extra shock spell. That's fine, I guess, it's not crazy. But it's that a free cast from it. That means when this triggers, the game treats it as if you'd pressed the button and triggered the cooldown. So let me kind of put this plainly. This legendary reads, you have a % chance to trigger the protection passive. You have a % chance to trigger the Arc Lash enchantment, which means you have a % chance to then, of course, trigger the stun damage that goes with it. and that is super good. Like, really super good. It means after you've used your ultimate and you finish blasting off all of your lightning and that's all good, we can mitigate the pain of not having it off cooldown by having this legendary effect active, consistently throwing out extra shock spells that trigger Lash enchantment, that give us a barrier, that stun everyone around us, and just feed into the synergies and damage of the build while also making us much harder to kill. Now, obviously, I only have a 7% chance of it happening, though it's still happening fairly frequently, as you can see. If you put this on a two-handed staff and you got a max roll, you would have a 20% chance, 1 in every 5 attacks. That is really, really good. It also, of course, affects your teleport, as that's a shock skill that does damage, so that's an extra chance for it to happen. But imagine if 1 out of every 5 basic attacks your character did, you AoE stunned every enemy, blasted them for damage, and gave you a shield for nearly half your health. That's obviously really good, and that's what I used as a loop to get through the Torment Capstone Dungeon, despite being 11 levels below it. It gave me that extra little bit of hard-to-killness that I really needed. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I realize it might be a little bit of a long-winded explanation, but I really wanted to hammer home just how useful this legendary is. It probably won't make it into an ultra endgame min-max perfect stats Clash Sorcerer build, and I will get that to you when I get there. I know what it's going to be, and it's incredibly promising, but for now, this evolution is really strong and will help you get into Torment essentially from like level 58 onwards with a right bit of gear, and just start working away in Torment, where everything is obviously much better. Better gear that drops, better XP by a long way, and better uniques, which are really good to have too. So now that you know the kind of main changes, the actual rest of the playstyle is just the same. Rotate your cooldowns, keep yourself alive, use your Flame Shield as your big emergency defensive, get your Frost Novas rotating, keep people vulnerable, blast them through, teleport to either escape danger or more accurately into the middle of a pack of enemies so you stun them all and start blasting. It's very simple. Spam Arc Lash, use your cooldowns where they make sense to both keep you alive and hurt people more. That's all well and good. Now, of course, this isn't one that you can get from a dungeon in your codex. You are going to have to get it to drop, and the best way to do that is to target weapons. One-handed weapons and the focuses too can come with it. I got mine from doing a bit of farming, and it dropped here, and I got the max roll of 10%. I'm saving this one for later, as it were, so that's the way to do it. Target weapon chests in Helltides, weapon caches in Tree of Whispers, and it shouldn't take you too long to get a hold of it. So looking at our actual legendaries then, I'm pretty happy with what's in every slot. It's not ideal, at least not if I was like level 75 and doing a proper endgame build with proper min-max stats. If I had a natural 30% crit chance and at least 35% cooldown reduction, then I would be showing you guys a different build, but getting that is really hard without the gear that drops from Torment. I'll also take this moment to go over what gemstones you want to put in your various equipment and stats you actually want to hopefully get on your gear, either from the drop or re-rolling at the enchanter. Gem-wise, you want green emerald, the crit damage on vulnerable in your weapon. In your armor, you want rubies for increased max health, and in your jewelry, you want skulls for increased armor. It really is noticeable having that armor bump, trust me. As far as what you want to be on your pieces, obviously uniques are set, but everything else, you want critical strike chance, cooldown reduction. They are your 2 premium ones. Past that, then, you want attack speed, basic attack speed, you want lucky hit chance, and you want just damage increasing things like intelligence, damage to stunned enemies, damage to vulnerable enemies, damage with your basic abilities, all of those things as just the final line of, yeah, it makes you do more. So for now, then, to help you get here, this is where it's at. You want, ideally, a wand and a offhand, and on the weapon, and this is whether it's a staff or a wand, you want the deal % more damage while you have a barrier active. We have barriers active constantly, of course. On our offhand then, this is also super important. We have a chance to stun distant enemies, which is all fine, you know, it plays into our stun synergies, but you deal 20% to 40% more damage to stunned enemies. That is massive. That is our main damage window on stunned enemies, and it helps in a big way. Then, on your necklace specifically, you want the rapid aspect to have more basic skill attack speed, as spamming out Arc Lash as fast as possible is the engine to this build. Then, of course, as we went over, you want the unstable currents, a chance to trigger while it's on cooldown to give you that extra little pizzazz, and then we want the extra damage to stunned and frozen enemies from the aspect of control. On our helmet, you want the Frost Nova double charge at the cost of a bit more cooldown. That's fine. Our cooldown reduction is really good from the Arc Lash passive and just the cooldown reduction we have on gear, because that's what we want to have, and this just lets you keep that vulnerable going a lot more, and is an extra button to press to trigger more barriers, more Arc Lash enchantment stuns, and it just works out really well having 2 goes at this. Of course, any that fit multiple slots you can have in any specific position, but I've got this on the helmet. Then you want the basic skills, give you a damage reduction of 20% for the amount of time that you roll. You are constantly only using a basic skill in Arc Lash, so this just reads, you take 20% less damage, congratulations, that is great. Then we have the Edge Masters aspect. This just makes us do X% more damage all the time because we have full mana all the time because we don't have any mana spenders, so it's just a huge buff with no drawback and certainly worth having. Then we have 2 uniques that are perfect and really give this whole setup a boost. The Ice Heart Briars, which massively improves your Frost Nova, and the Frozen Death also then triggering an extra Frost Nova means that when you're clearing out a crowd of enemies, they're just constantly popping and refreezing and revulnerabling everyone, and it's so useful. Then we have Esu's Heirloom, which basically just reads, here, have a load more crit chance, and move really quickly. And crit chance is key to this whole endeavor. This is perfect, and even if I was level 100 with everything I could want, I would still be wearing the most powerful version of these boots that I had. They are just the way. So that only leaves Paragon and what we're doing with it, and it should be said the Paragon board is a good 70% of the reason why we now have the Firebolt Enchantment and not the Fireball Enchantment. And let's get into exactly why that is. We have 2 boards access now. I will only go through 2 boards because if you're at the stage that this video is intended for, wanting to beat the Capstone Dungeon, you're level sort of 58 to 65-ish, you're going to have roughly the same points as I do. I've done 3 Renown Zones fully, so those bonus 12 really help, but you're just not going to be into a 3rd board yet, so it doesn't really matter. On our first board, you can see the path that I've taken, and you pretty much want to mirror it, grabbing this extra little bit of defense. Over here is nice, and the intelligence just means more damage. Our first glyph that you're after is the control glyph, which obviously gives you a huge bonus to stunned frozen enemies. Like a huge bonus. Obviously get all the decks in range so you actually activate it and just enjoy this silly burst that comes with stuns. This is how bosses just die the second you stagger them, at least if they're within any kind of range of your level. Then we move on like this, get to this board, and then we want to attach the Burning board. The board that has ourselves this legendary node. And we want to rotate the board so it is in this orientation, the legendary node at the top right, and that's because we don't care about the legendary node. What we care about is this. Damage reduction from burning enemies. Damage reduction from burning enemies. We also care very much about this. Plus % damage to burning enemies. Plus % damage to burning enemies. And then there's obviously more of it. Another plus 20% damage to burning enemies. You see obviously why this is so good. Because of the Firebolt enchantment, every enemy we're attacking is permanently burning. So this board gives you like an extra 70% damage on everything you do to them. take the path very similar to what I have. Obviously, to activate this, you need 270 willpower, so you might be able to do a slightly different configuration round here that I have, but generally this is what you're after. Finally then, the glyph that we want next is territorial. Damage reduction against close enemies. Everything we're fighting is close, because this is essentially a melee build, and then obviously increased damage to close enemies. Again, that's everything we're attacking, because this is essentially a melee build. This just gives you a huge bump in all the areas that you need it. And on the burning board, we just get a huge damage output increase, but most importantly, arguably, a huge damage taken decrease, which is what will let you actually survive as you attempt to push the capstone and play in Torment, despite being 10 plus levels below it, like what I have done. So, I hope that has helped, and I hope that has given you something to kind of see and be like, okay, maybe I can indeed do the Capstone Dungeon where I am, and I don't need to push on and grind XP anymore. So with that all said, look out over the next couple of days for a kind of level 65, more securely endgame. We're not too worried as much about survivability Sorcerer build that I'll be bringing you, and of course an eventual properly min-max level 80, 90 plus endgame perfect version to work towards with the full Paragon and all of that good stuff. Of course, the builds will keep coming, and we will always be here for your source of them, and it means a lot that you've been enjoying them so much and found them to be actually effective. We really put a lot of time into working out what works and why, and it's really something that we're passionate about. And indeed, you can now also find a link to the build in written form down below too. For now then, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.